So courage, integrity, sacrifice, the National Medal of Honor. It's the highest military decoration awarded for conspicuous acts of valor here in the United States. And we are honored to have with us tonight Bill Donaio, who's the adjutant with the American Legion Shannon Shattuck Post 182, and Paul Willis, who's the historian with Shannon Shattuck Post 182. So these gentlemen are going to share a storied history of the medal itself. They're going to also provide details about a Granby. Is there a Granby citizen
There
who was
certainly
awarded?
is.
I don't want. I'm stealing thunder now.
You
so
are.
I'm
You
so
are.
sorry.
Not fair.
Okay.
Not
So
fair.
this is a timely presentation because 1 week from tonight is the actual National Medal of Honor Day, and they are opening up the National Medal of Honor Museum in Arlington, Texas. So we've got the scoop here tonight. So gentlemen, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead. Take the lead, Bill.
So, Holly, you did lay in the cots and pillows?
Oh, no.
Oh.
You guys are going to keep it moving along. It's gonna go quickly.
We have till 1930 hours. Is that correct, ma'am?
This is correct. I'll blow the whistle.
Okay.
I'm Bill Donaio. I served in the United States Air Force for almost 26 years.
I'm Paul Willis, and I served in the U.S. Navy and U.S. Merchant Marine for several years.
And tonight we're going to obviously talk about the Medal of Honor and share with you some stories, history, and answer any questions that you might have that either we can take home or do some tap dancing right here. So,
Okay. For the introduction, we're going to talk to you tonight about the significance of the Medal of Honor, the origin and history of the Medal of Honor, and the legislation shaping the Medal of Honor and evolution over time, the current status of the medal, the above and beyond the call of duty, modern benefits of the Medal of Honor recipients, and the National Medal of Honor Museum. Okay, Bill?
we're going to intersperse the history of the Medal of Honor with some, I think, the most important things, the stories of the men and the women who, through valor and honor, earned the highest military decoration that the United States can give. Salvatore Gunta, in 2007 in Afghanistan, was serving as a rifle team leader with an airborne unit when he and his team were ambushed navigating through harsh terrain, mountainous terrain. They were ambushed by well-armed and well-coordinated insurgent forces. The enemy, Taliban, initiated the attack with intense machine gun and rocket-propelled grenade fire. Under heavy fire, Gunta immediately sprinted towards cover and engaged the enemy. And seeing that his squad leader, who had led the patrol, had fallen, and believing he had been injured, Gunta exposed himself to withering enemy fire and raced towards his squad leader, helping him to cover and administering medical aid. While administering first aid, enemy fire struck Gunta's body armor and his secondary weapon. Despite the ongoing fire, Gunta engaged the enemy before prepping and throwing grenades using explosions for cover to conceal his position. Attempting to reach the additional wounded fellow soldiers who were separated from the squad, Gunta and his team encountered a barrage of enemy fire that forced them to the ground. The team continued forward, and upon reaching the wounded soldiers, Gunta realized that another soldier was still separated from the element and was being carried away by the Taliban to be used as a propaganda tool, of course, drugged through the streets and otherwise humiliated after being killed. As he crested the hill, he saw that this other wounded soldier was there, and upon reaching that wounded soldier, he began to provide medical aid. In the process of reaching that soldier, he killed one of the Taliban and injured another. Salvador Gunta's unwavering courage, selflessness, and decisive leadership while under extreme enemy fire were integral to his platoon's ability to defeat the enemy ambush and recover a fellow American soldier from an infamous fate from the enemy Taliban.
Okay. The highest military direction awarded by the United States government, the most prestigious military decoration. The Medal of Honor is the highest military decoration awarded by the U.S. government, and it was established during the Civil War. Its honor acts as a valor and gallantry above and beyond the call of duty. This medal symbolizes exceptional heroism and the nation's gratitude for bravery and sacrifice of all its service members.
You know, Paul, there were only two other medals that were in the service before the Civil War.
That's right. Can you tell us what those were?
One was the Medal of Merit that George Washington is a stitched cloth medal, and the other was the Purple Heart.
That's right, the Purple Heart. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, fine. All right. So, as a testament to extraordinary courage, the Medal of Honor is the ultimate recognition of heroism, showcasing the extraordinary courage and valor of the awardees. Each recipient performed acts of bravery that exemplified the highest ideals of military service. And you can see here in a photograph of President Obama awarding this sergeant a Medal of Honor. Audie Murphy. I think many of you may know of Audie Murphy, and despite actions earning the Medal of Honor, January 28, 1945, near Holswer in France, commanding Company B, the 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. He was ambushed by German forces. He was attacked by 6 German tanks and waves of infantry, ordered men to withdraw while he directed artillery fire. Heroic actions on a burning tank destroyer, continued bravery despite injury, and the impact of Murphy's actions are extraordinary. He saved his whole company from possible encirclement and destruction, enabled them to hold the woods, the enemy to the enemy's objective, and instrumental in the mission's success. He stayed, Murphy stayed well behind. He climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of exploding, and used his .50 caliber machine gun to evacuate
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
Bring it back. And back. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. And he, let's see, where was I? So he held his position, as I said, and ignored his injuries and continued to fight until his ammunition was exhausted. Then he made his way back to his company, refused medical attention, and organized a counterattack that forced the Germans to withdraw.
Audie Murphy received every decoration of valor that the United States Army could give to him, and then the French and the British also awarded him decorations of valor. He was, of course, used by the Department of Defense to help the raise war bonds, encourage the home front to self-sacrifice, and living up to the standards that he exemplified out on the battlefield back home. This is an important part to remember, is that the Medal of Honor served many purposes. And in the military itself, it serves as a recognition of the selfless actions to change the course of a battle through valorous means. And but back home, these men were used by the Department of Defense and the public at large, held up as people to emulate and to admire. They called them heroes, but as we'll see later on, most of these men didn't feel like they were heroes. Rather, they felt like they were the one that got the medal, but they represented all of those who did not. There's a storied history of the medal in the Army and the Navy, and we'll try to go through that very quickly.
Okay. So the creation of Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor legislation of 1861. The Medal of Honor was first authorized by Congress and signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln on December 21st, 1861. This act provided for the creation of the Medal of Honor to be awarded to enlisted members of the Navy and Marine Corps who distinguished themselves by their gallantry in action. The Army Medal of Honor, 1862, on July 12, 1862, Congress authorized the Medal of Honor for enlisted soldiers in the Army, and this act was signed into law by President Lincoln and extended the award to Army personnel.
So this is a picture of the Capitol that was under construction in 1862. And I think we chose this image because it represents how much our country was engaged in change. Not just the Civil War, which was a spasm of change, but the 18th century and the Founding Fathers were 70 years in the past. And the move forward into the middle of the 19th century and defining our country as not just a collection of separate states but a nation is a defining moment of the Civil War. And the Medal of Honor was used by Congress and by Abraham Lincoln as part of the initiative to draft people into the Union Army. The first draft ever was during the Civil War, and it was recognized that that the men that were serving had reasons of their own for raising their hand and joining the regiments from their states. And so we picked this image because we were still a country under construction, even though we were also in the throes of a bitter war. So it's time to take a step back from the history and talk a little bit about the very first recipients of the Medal of Honor. As Paul said, the Navy actually was authorized the medal in 1861 and the Army then in 1862. But the very first people that were awarded the Medal of Honor were the recipients of the Andrews Raiders group. Now, has anybody seen the movie The General with Buster Keaton? The General was the train in that Buster Keaton was trying to steal away from the Confederacy. Well, the story of that is true. It was this group of raiders who went behind enemy lines, commandeered the Confederate locomotive, the General, and drove it north. In the process of doing so, ripped up communication lines and rail lines behind them. They only got about 12 or 14 miles before they had to dismount the train and start moving along on foot. And eventually they were captured by the Confederates. Several were killed. And several were executed outright. Andrews was captured. And then later, the president awarded 6 members of the Raider Party the first Medals of Honor in U.S. history, and that was in 1863. In total, 19 of the 24 participants eventually received the Medal of Honor, recognizing their courage and the significance of their mission. But of note, James Andrews, the man that led the party, was a civilian, and he was not awarded the Medal of Honor.
Okay. So, here we have the Army Medal of Honor design. And it evolved from its original 1862 design, featuring a star-shaped medal with Minerva, and to the 1904 Gillespie design with an eagle and the word Valor on a blue neck ribbon, as you can see here with it there. It included 13 white stars, which you can see here. So that's the typical Gillespie design of 1904. Okay.
And the medal is very similar to that design today, if I may.
Yes.
There's this is this image of Minerva, the goddess of wisdom and war, and she has got the shield of democracy and repulsing discord. It's a man that's holding snakes in his hand, symbolizing discord and war. Later on in the Gillespie decoration, Minerva is a profile of Minerva with a helmet, and on that helmet is the owl of wisdom, symbolizing the wise application of force in warfare.
Now,
we have a very special story to tell you, and to do that, I'm going to try to bring up a video. It will last about 4.5 minutes. It tells the story of the one and only woman who received the Medal of Honor.
To His Excellency Lincoln, President USA. The undersigned asked to be assigned to duty at Douglas Hospital, but she would much prefer to have a surgeon's commission with orders to go wherever and whenever there is a battle, where her energy, enthusiasm, professional abilities, and patriotism will be of the greatest service. Mary E. Walker, M.D.
Mary Walker is distinguished by being the only woman ever to have been awarded the Medal of Honor. She had received a degree in medicine when there were about 300 women doctors in the entire country.
Mary Edwards Walker had volunteered in military hospitals and at the Battle of Fredericksburg before requesting a commission in the Army. But President Lincoln refused to overrule his officers, who thought no woman was suited to the job of a military surgeon.
Even though she kept running into resistance, there was a real need for doctors, and she just wouldn't go away. So eventually she was made a contract surgeon and received pay for her services. But she was an eclectic practitioner. She believed that you did what worked, and she felt amputation was strictly a last resort.
Walker's reluctance to amputate limbs made her popular with the troops. But her insistence on wearing trousers under her skirt annoyed General William Tecumseh Sherman. "Put on decent clothes, go back to Nashville, into the hospitals where our poor boys are dying of wounds and fevers, and imitate the women in hoops and petticoats who are devoting their time to the work of nursing." Instead, Walker returned to the front lines, and by the winter of 1864 was making frequent trips into Confederate territory to treat wounded and sick civilians. Eventually, she was captured in Georgia and imprisoned by the Confederates as a spy.
And of course, they were absolutely horrified that a woman would dress like this and would talk like this. They actually made a spectacle out of her, just parading her through the streets of Richmond so that people could see what kind of depravity the Yankee Nation was promoting.
Walker spent 4 months as a Confederate prisoner. Eventually, even General Sherman overcame his distaste for her dress and recommended her for the Medal of Honor. It was awarded by President Andrew Johnson in late 1865 and made her, for a time, one of the most famous women in the country.
She was viewed as eccentric, as nutty, as contentious, as ornery, and I think she probably was all of those things.
But Mary Edwards Walker was also a civilian. When the Medal of Honor criteria were tightened before World War I, a board was created with the power to rescind awards that did not meet the new standards of heroism in combat. Medals of Honor given out in the Civil War just for re-enlisting were rescinded. So were those given to civilians.
One of which famously was given to Buffalo Bill Cody. His medal was rescinded because Cody was a scout for the Army. He was a civilian employee. Of course, that medal was later reinstated because he was Buffalo Bill Cody. And they rescinded Mary Walker's, which was a stupid thing to do. She absolutely refused to acknowledge that the medal had been rescinded, and she refused to give it back, and wore it every day of her life.
In 1977, 60 years after it was taken away, Mary Edwards Walker's Medal of Honor was reinstated by President Jimmy Carter.
I think a lot of people should feel uncomfortable about the whole idea of taking medals away from anybody. There were certain rules during the Civil War. Certain people received the medal, and we feel today that a lot of those awards were inappropriate. But by the standards they had at the time, it was perfectly appropriate.
So here was an extraordinary woman who had so much to offer. They took the medal away from her, and she wore it anyway. You got to give her a lot of credit and certainly determination. But the very fact is, she deserved that medal, and it was without question. Okay.
So we have a special recipient of the Medal of Honor next. Granby's own Lorenzo Denning. Lorenzo Denning was born in Connecticut, in Granby, Connecticut, on September 6, 1843, and died in 1865. He was an American sailor who fought in the Civil War. Denning received the highest award for bravery during combat for his action aboard the U.S. Navy Picket Boat No. 1 on October 1864 in the sinking of the Confederate ram boat Albemarle. Did I say that right?
That's
yes.
correct, and that is, and this is the Albemarle just here. And it's interesting. After the sinking, you can note here the Picket boat is about to be sunk, and it was the graphics of the time. There was no photographs available, but this is the best depiction by an eyewitness.
So both were steam powered, and you could see that the Picket boat was, the ram, the Confederate ram Albemarle was steel clad. So it was the Picket boat had a torpedo on its prow and rammed the Albemarle and it ignited the torpedo, sinking both ships. Denning was able, and several of his fellow crew members were able to escape, but at a later date died before the medal was presented to him. But we were amazed to discover that one of Granby's own in the Civil War was awarded the Medal of Honor.
Correct. Okay. Medals of Honor have been awarded to 3,528 recipients since its creation during the Civil War. And this includes 19 individuals who have received the medal twice for their extraordinary acts of valor, if you can imagine. Connecticut has 81 recipients, with 43 from the Civil War and 38 recognized later. And as of 1998, there were 3,410 recipients who have been awarded Medals of Honor. As I said, 19 of those
Were awarded twice.
were awarded twice. Thank you. So a total of 81 recipients were either born in Connecticut or lived here when they entered the armed forces, and 43 of those from Connecticut received the Medal of Action in the Civil War. 38 were recognized subsequently. And so you can see right here that this was a pretty significant amount of medals that were awarded.
So Paul, you know I made a mistake in this slide. I said 19 people won the medal.
Yeah, that's right. They
received it.
They received it. They didn't win it.
This is not something somebody in their right mind would seek to win. And so this is it's important when we talk about the recipients of the Medal of Honor. They're not winners of the Medals of Honor. They are representatives of first of themselves and the actions they conducted, but also of those who were not recognized, but certainly deserved the recognition. And they have, to a man, every interview I've ever seen of men who were awarded the Medal of Honor said were very humble about it, and they insisted that they didn't do anything the next guy wouldn't have done. They were in the right place at the right time, and it was a job that had to happen.
Okay. So here we have the Navy Medal of Honor. Hoorah. The Medal of Honor has been significant, seen significant changes over the years, and the Navy Medal of Honor has evolved over time. You know, remember that it was initially designed in 1861, and it featured Minerva and Discord, as Bill pointed out. And in 1916, a special pension was established for the recipients. The Navy introduced the Tiffany Cross, which is located
On the right.
on the right over here. That was by Louis Comfort Tiffany in 1919, but it was later discontinued. So when the Army and the Navy joined forces, amazing things happened. Absolutely. Okay.
So, Jimmy Doolittle, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, probably America's best flyer of the day, was approached by General Hap A. Arnold with a plan 6 months after the bombing of Pearl Harbor to get the Japanese. Think about what was going on at the time. For 6 months, the Japanese had been marching across the Pacific. And for 6 months, all the American public saw was the Imperial Japanese winning. The story on the other side of the world wasn't much better, but the focus was here in the Pacific. Hap Arnold asked Jimmy Doolittle if he could do this, and Jimmy, being the kind of aviator that he was, he knew that airplane, the Mitchell B-25, and he knew that it was capable of taking off from a very, very short runway. And so he said, yes, we'll do it. So he and his 16 crews practiced short takeoffs and bombing in multiple conditions without the Norton bomb sight. Because in the case of capture, the American Air Force did not want the bomb sight to be captured by the Japanese, as it was the state of the art for the day. And then the B-25s were loaded on the USS Hornet and steamed west, and it was only then that the crews were told that they were going to attack Japanese mainland directly. So leading the 16 B-25 bombers, 80 crew members participated in the raid on April 18th, 1942. They all hit their targets, or hit targets, but I mean, really, the 16 Mitchell bombers could only carry about 2,000 pounds of weapons, of bombs, and in the grand scheme of things probably didn't do a whole heck of a lot of damage. However, they certainly struck a blow to the psychological belief of the Japanese that they could only win, and in favor of the Americans' home front, who needed the good news that we could reach out and strike Tokyo. For exceptional courage and determination and leadership, Jimmy Doolittle, as a representative of all 80 of the men that flew over Japan that day, was awarded the Medal of Honor. And a couple of images here. This is the B-25s loaded on the aircraft carrier. And here is the USS Hornet, with one B-25 actually having taken off from the bow. And interestingly, they all takeoff operations from aircraft carriers are steered into the wind so that they could get better lift on takeoff. And so Jimmy Doolittle, who was at the very front of that stack of B-25s, actually took off about 100 feet before the end of the bow. That was pretty amazing.
And if you'll notice before you go, before we move on, you'll notice that these are pretty tough weather conditions here. Probably 25 knots of wind or more, and the ship was in this heavy sea here. And so when the aircraft went to the bow here, it would dip down ever so slightly and hope that it could have enough lift, enough airspeed to get off and get some air.
In fact, the Navy pilots teaching the Air Force pilots said, watch for the rhythm and try to time your takeoff for when the bow is up.
Absolutely.
And, I forgot to mention that they had to take off about 400 miles sooner than they had planned, because the Hornet and the escorting ships were sighted by a Japanese patrol boat. That patrol boat was sunk, but not before it could radio back to Japan that they had seen an aircraft carrier battle group. Nobody knows for sure if the Japanese knew that there was bombers on board the Hornet, but they had Doolittle and Admiral Halsey had to believe that the Japanese were aware, and so before the carrier battle group could come under attack by the Japanese Navy, they needed to launch those B-25s and get them in the air.
Right.
Consequently, it meant that their landing, they were planning to land in Soviet Russia and China at the time. Chiang Kai-shek was the leader of the military in China, resisting the Japanese. So many of the B-25s ran out of fuel before actually getting to the landing strips that they were designated. Many of the air crew bailed out, and the Japanese were able to capture. This was over occupied China, largely Manchuria, and many of the Japanese captured the airmen. Many of those airmen were outright murdered, and others were taken as prisoner for the duration of the war. But most of Doolittle's raiders were recovered by friendly forces and eventually repatriated to the U.S., where Jimmy Doolittle, as their leader, their intrepid leader, and their representative, was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Roosevelt. I guess it's only right, since we talked about the Army Medal of Honor, and we talked about the Navy Medal of Honor. We just ought to mention that the Air Force has a Medal of Honor too. Of course, the Air Force was part of the Army up through 1947, and was awarded any airmen who earned the recognition were awarded the Army Medal of Honor. And there were many. Think of all of the bombers that flew in Europe on daylight strikes against Germany.
That's right.
Sorry, brings up some pretty heavy emotions to me. These people, once they became, after the war, a separate service, they still used the Army decoration in Korea, and up through 1965. So any of the other actions prior to that were using the Army decoration. The medal design itself features a profile of liberty suspended under a starburst. This is a typical Air Force symbology. And I would point out also is that you can tell the difference between the medals of honor for the services based on the suspension device. So we'll see others more clearly, but the suspension device, this is uniquely Air Force. The suspension device for the Navy is an anchor, and there's others. The other device for the Army is
Eagle.
The Eagle. Thank you.
Okay. So, the criteria for the award. Medal of Honor is awarded to any of the U.S. Armed Forces members for acts of valor, and those acts must involve gallantry and intrepidity at life risk occurring in specific military engagements. So let's go to John. Let's go. Levitow. Yeah.
John Levitow.
Levitow.
Yeah. I met John Levitow several times, and I was able to engage in a personal conversation with him once. His story was pretty fascinating. He flew in Vietnam in an AC-47, and this is the middle picture is Mr. Levitow, Airman First Class, and Airman First Class is an E3 in the Air Force. He was a loadmaster, and what happened was, as they were flying a mission, the aircraft was struck by a hostile mortar round, causing a massive explosion that ripped a hole through the wing and created over 3,500 holes in the fuselage, the bottom picture there. Despite suffering over 40 fragments that wounded his back and legs, Levitow saw a burning flare rolling around the cargo area. The flare's fuse was burning, and it was surrounded by ammunition cans containing more than 19,000 rounds of live ammunition. Despite his injuries and the partial loss of feeling in his right leg, Levitow crawled across the cargo floor to reach the flare. Unable to grasp it with his hands, he threw himself onto the burning flare, hugged it to his body, and dragged himself to the rear of the aircraft. He then hurled the flare out of the open cargo door just as it ignited in air, saving the aircraft and its crew from certain death. Levitow's gallantry and profound concern for his fellow airmen at the risk of his own life exemplified the highest traditions of the United States Air Force and reflect great credit upon himself and the armed forces of this country. To this day, in the Air Force, we remember John Levitow at every professional military education school in the Air Force. At every base they have one. And when the airman who graduates with the highest grade point average, if you will, the highest grades for the professional military education school, that's NCO Academy, the Airman Leadership School, the Senior NCO Academy, and the Chiefs Academy. The person, man or woman, who distinguishes themselves ahead of their peers is awarded the John L. Levitow Award in memory of Mr. Levitow. When I spoke with Mr. Levito, he was very, very humble man. And he said that he didn't do anything special. He did what was needed to do at the time, and then any of the other fellows in the airplane would have done the same thing if they were where he was and able to move. And he is representative of that same attitude of humbleness. But when the need was there, they saw that need and they did it then. There was no waiting around. You do it and you get it done. Moving on.
Okay. So, nomination and approval process, as you can imagine, it's quite rigorous. And the nomination and approval process involves thorough documentation, multiple levels of review within the military, commercial structure, and the department, through the Department of Defense, and ultimately by the President. And so you can see here all the chain of command through here, and ultimately leads to the President of the United States, who makes the final determination. So,
Congress does have an oversight function with this, and they have to do the approval. That's why it's sometimes mislabeled the Congressional Medal of Honor.
correct.
But the other thing to remember is, I mean, this is a bureaucratic nightmare. Paperwork in the military, like paperwork anywhere else, does not flow in a steady stream, and sometimes paperwork gets lost. And so even during the last administration, there was President Biden decorated a couple of soldiers with the Medal of Honor for actions that were done in Afghanistan 15 years ago. So the process works.
It does.
Often?
Yes, but slowly.
But slowly. We've told stories about an airman, even though he was in the Army at the time, and a sailor. So this is a very quick story about Michael Murphy. In Kunar Province, Afghanistan in 2005, Lieutenant Murphy was leading a special four-man SEAL team reconnaissance unit, and they were on a mission to locate a high-level Taliban militia leader. The team was discovered by local sympathizers who tipped the Taliban, and soon the team was besieged by a force of 30 to 40 enemy fighters. Despite being heavily outnumbered and wounded, Murphy and his team in a fierce firefight inflicted numerous enemy casualties. But the four of them realized that they needed to get assistance, and so Murphy tried to radio in a call for help. But being they were in mountainous region, the radio was a line of sight radio. They could not reach anybody, so he bravely left his position of cover and moved into the open terrain to get a clear signal for communication, thus exposing himself to direct enemy fire. He successfully contacted his headquarters and requested immediate support for his team. While making the call, Murphy was shot multiple times but continued to provide his location and request for help. He returned to his cover position to continue fighting until an hour later he was mortally wounded. Michael Murphy's selfless leadership, courageous actions, and extraordinary devotion to duty exemplify the highest standards of valor and heroism.
So what we're doing right now is to look at the Medals of Honor since 1999. And there'll be a moment of silence as we reflect on these heroes. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, as we wind down, these are, as I promised, images of the 3 service medals of honor. These are stamps.
There's a postage stamps issued, I believe, in 2015 in honor, to commemorate the Medal of Honor.
So, as we move to our ending, where do we go from here? As Holly mentioned, a week from today is the National Medal of Honor Day, and this happens every year on March 25th. 26th? 25th.
25th.
But this year's a special year because the National Medal of Honor Museum in Arlington, Texas is going to open its doors to the public. Actually, on Saturday, they're going to have the gala opening with many of today's living recipients of the Medal of Honor attending. It's dedicated to preserving and showcasing the history and the stories of the recipients of the Medal of Honor, with interactive exhibits that are focused not just on those of us that served in the military, but the families that of those men, as well as an education for the general public of the exceptional valor that these men demonstrated. And before I bring up we have a very short clip from the director of the National Museum to give you a little bit more background. I just want to leave you with this thought. And this is something that in the Air Force, we heard this a lot. If not now, then when? If not me, then who? And I think the men who won, I'll take that back, who were awarded the Medal of Honor embodied this idea.
I'm Chris Cassidy, the President and CEO of the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation. We're sitting inside the soon-to-open National Medal of Honor Museum. We're in Arlington, Texas, the center of the country physically. We've been under construction for 3 years, and this is a wonderful moment to unveil the project to the country. This is a museum about people who are normal Americans, everyday citizens that did something extraordinary on a day when the nation needed them to do it. Every year in our country, March 25th is Medal of Honor Day. By no small coincidence, that's the day we open the doors to the public. As with any museum or attraction, it needs to be interesting for the whole family. Not just interesting for dad who served or mom who served, but for the whole family. So we put a lot of thought into interactive displays and ways people of all ages can engage. It's a place where you learn about courage, commitment, sacrifice to others, service over self, and be inspired for those concepts perhaps in your everyday life. And that's really our mission, is to inspire people to be better versions of themselves using these stories as an example. People will encounter what we call islands, or basically a big table that has a featured recipient, in some cases 2 or 3 others on there as well, where there's similar stories. Along the perimeter, and you see some of that behind me, various pictures and quotes and other things that recipients have been involved in. There's another experience where you're put in the mindset of a helicopter dust-off pilot in Vietnam, where you have to make the similar decisions. You're faced with the criteria: do I go to refuel now, or do I push on to get the person in this limited window that I have, and a few other scenarios like that. That's our largest artifact that we have, and we felt like that square footage was well used because that helicopter is a centerpiece of so many amazing stories. Our project is really threefold. It's the physical building of the museum. In a couple of years, we'll be constructing a monument on the nation's mall in DC, and that's exciting in and of itself, and we're working through the congressional authorization right now, actually, to close that out. And the third aspect is a leadership institute. On March 22nd, when we've got the Medal of Honor recipients here and dignitaries from around the country, it'll be a great deal of pride for our staff to look at the building, to look at those people, and we know the hard work that's gone into it in 3 years, not just in the design and construction, but the philanthropic support that it takes to pull something like this off. And in my old job as an astronaut, we used to say, no bucks, no Buck Rogers, and that adage applies to building a facility for a nonprofit, and it takes so many generous people and companies around the country to enable it to happen. So figuratively holding the hands of all those people that we walked through the threshold of the building that day, it'll be a pretty exciting time.
Great.
Places around the net.
That's correct.
Okay.
Remember, the Air Force has got the Starburst, as we pointed out before, just here, and the Navy's got the Anchor, and the Army has the Eagle.
Okay.
So also, any of the military units that are subordinate to those departments, the Coast Guard, for instance, and the Marine Corps fall under the United States Navy, Department of the Navy. Valorous actions that are awarded the Medal of Honor get the Navy Medal of Honor for those people who would earn it in those units. The Space Force, the U.S. Space Force, the newest branch of the military, would fall under the Air Force and receive an Air Force One until at some point we're fighting Chinese up on the moon, and they'll get their own probably.
Okay, any further questions? Well, thank you all for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Oh, another one? Another question?
3,528 medals were awarded. When you take out the Civil War, I think it takes it down to 2,000. Somewhere around there. But anyway, I guess the point I'm making is when you showed that since 1999, there's only been
26.
Right. So what you're alluding to, first off, I think it was closer, like only about 500 or 600 were removed or rescinded. Most of those for valor, whether or not they were in the military, were reinstated. There was a unit from Maine who was promised, each man was promised a Medal of Honor ahead of the Battle of Gettysburg if they would re-enlist. And so, they re-enlisted and they each got one. So later on in 1916, those decorations were rescinded. But the fact is that during the major wars through history, World War I and World War II, and Korea in particular, and Vietnam, the kinds of battle that we were having on the ground involved a large number of warriors, both on the ground, on the sea, and in the air. Warfare today has greatly changed. We had no casualties when we fought the Milosevic's Yugoslavs in the 1999 mission. I think we only had a handful of casualties in the first Desert Storm. And that's because we rely heavily on technology today. There's no secret there. That projects power from a single soldier, a single airman, a single sailor into the enemy, in the midst of the enemy, in order to accomplish whatever the mission is at the time. So, yeah.
Just the only point I was making, it's a very small number that since 1999 have moved forward to be awarded the Medal of Honor, even though there's been conflict. And it's got to do with time, with all that goes into it to award it.
And of those 9 men, since 1999, the 4 of those that were awarded posthumously threw themselves on a live grenade that was thrown in the middle of their group. And that is the definition of service before self, protecting your brothers and sisters that are at your side. And that that's the motivation for these people to do something that is totally irrational. Is they don't care so much about the American flag at the time. They don't care so much about serving America. They care about their brothers and sisters that are there in battle with them. And every single one of these people talk about that is, I didn't do it for me. I didn't do it for any of the other big ideas. I did it for the guys that were in my group.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I just want to I'm going to get all choked up. I just want to give a special thank you again to Bill and to Paul for investing all that time and effort into doing this research to bring more awareness to the public about the National Medal of Honor, and especially that we have a Granby connection.
We do. That was
So,
very exciting for us as well.
I think that was
Absolutely.
really exciting. So again, Bill Donaio, adjutant with our Shannon Shattuck Post 182, and Paul, historian with Shannon Shattuck 182. And I thank you all for coming tonight and listening. And I want to also let you know that the Granby Community TV will be airing a version of the presentation. So if you'd like to watch it again or share the information with your friends, I'm sure they'll find this fascinating, very, very informative. So thanks again, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Honored to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, Holly, can you get museum passes to the open?